Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host is Chris. What's up, buddy?
Hello, Zach. As always, wonderful to be here, and hello to our audience around the world. And we have a special treat, a wonderful episode for us today. Sophia and Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a wonderful time, and this is going to be fantastic discussions.
Thanks so much for having us, you guys. We're really excited.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. For those of you watching or listening all over the interwebs and the globe, and maybe Antarctica one day, Chris, maybe one day, we do appreciate it. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And today we do have a special treat because we are doing a Star Trek Legacy Captain Mashup or Captain What If, whatever you want to call it. And we have the pleasure of introducing the Where's Beverly podcast hosted by Sophia and Adrienne to the show. They have a wonderful podcast. If you haven't checked them out, be sure to go find them. So I want to start with you guys the way we start with a lot of our guests and kind of jump back in time travel, just like they do in Star Trek, and tell us where did your Star Trek journey begin? And then kind of talk about how the podcast got started. How'd you name it and all that stuff?
Sophia, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I think you should start.
You think I should start? Okay, but you're going to have to tell people where they can find us because I don't know.
Okay.
So, okay. All right. So, I guess my original Star Trek journey began when I was 6 or 7 years old. My mom was a fan of the original series, and for some reason, they started broadcasting it on Friday nights, like after TGIF, if you guys remember that. I don't know how old everybody is, but they would like broadcast the original series on like our local ABC. And so my mom and I would watch it together, and I was just like, oh, this is so great. This is like, I don't, like my brain just kind of like lit up, and it was just really cool. And then but I didn't get really, really into it until probably about 10 years later when I started watching TNG. I started watching TNG about a month after it had gone off the air. So I was really bummed that I had like just missed it, but I did get to see First Contact in the theaters, and that was really, really cool. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then in terms of our podcast, Sophia and I have been friends for almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. Okay. We met online because of a shared interest in really dark historical German language musical theater based on historical events, right? Like as you do, as one does. And we were friends for a while, I think, before we realized that we both really, really loved Star Trek. But it was always kind of like, it wasn't something that we talked about a lot. And then towards the beginning of the pandemic, we really started. Picard season 1 came out, and we were talking about it all the time. We were sending each other like 30, 45 minutes, an hour of voice messaging every day talking about Picard. And then I think Sophia one day was like, what if we just did a podcast about it? And we're like, okay, sure. And we'll call it Where's Beverly? Because where the hell is Beverly Crusher in this show, right? And so that's kind of how we got started with that. And then we started originally just covering Picard as a show, and we've covered some of Strange New Worlds, all of Picard, and now we just sort of cover whatever episodes we feel like. Or sometimes we talk about things like which Star Trek character would buy you tampons. So that's kind of our thing. And then Sophia, is there anything else, or I guess how you kind of got into it?
Yeah, I think right now we're just doing whatever we want, which means that we're gonna have a Lower Decks episode coming up soon. We just kind of cover whatever tickles our fancy at the moment, which has been really fun, really freeing. And eventually, I'm going to use that platform to make Adrian watch DS9. My Star Trek journey happened a little bit later. So in college, I needed something to watch after finishing all of the Stargate franchise. And I was just like very sad, and there was like a Stargate shaped hole in my heart. So in college, a friend was like, "You've seen all of Stargate, but you haven't seen any Star Trek. You need to watch Star Trek." So I started with TNG and just like fell in love with it. And then from there got into Voyager, got into DS9, and then all of the newer Trek as well, and just like haven't looked back since.
Wow, that's outstanding. it is destiny that both of you connected and were able to start this. Absolutely. So for Sophia and Adrienne, like in terms of so what you've seen from Star Trek, do you have a favorite series, or amongst you, do you have a favorite captain, or either one?
Ooh, I can't say like a favorite series
Mhm.
because I love like all of them are so good. I really, really like DS9 because I just think it's the outlier. It's so different. But Voyager has a special place in my heart because it is just bonkers. It is there is no formula. It is like DS9 is a political drama. It's wonderful. And in Voyager, a cheese almost broke the ship. And I really like that. But recently, Lower Decks has been
Hmm.
just, I am not an animation fan. And then I was dead set against watching it. And then I just sat down one day and I think I watched basically the entire series in about a weekend. And it is a love letter to Star Trek fans. It's so thoughtfully made. Yes, it's a comedy, but like the showcase of wonderful friendships and just allowing characters to be imperfect but still good people. It just really showcases for me what Star Trek is, which is just forgiveness and real, very realistic characters. And it's so good. But in terms of favorite captain, Cisco, because he punched Q in the face that one time.
Nice.
Well, I think Sophia, you and I would agree on many things when it comes to Star Trek. Then that's awesome. What about you, Adrian?
This is such a hard question, right? Like I love all of the Star Treks. The only one that I haven't seen DS9 yet, and I haven't seen Discovery yet. But that's because I'm waiting, right? They're going to be viewed, and I know I love them in their own right. I think TNG is like my heart series. Like, it's the series of my heart, and I love Picard. Picard is the captain of my heart, right? He's probably my favorite captain just because he was my first real captain, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I really just love I really just love every single character on TNG so much. Like just I love all of them. They're so good. And growing up, I identified a lot with Deanna Troy in a lot of different ways. And so that was just kind of a really nice positive role model to have growing up. And Beverly Crusher as well. I just identified a lot more with Troy. But in terms of favorite series, I think Voyager is my favorite because, as Sophia said, it's so bonkers. And because I am me, I have thought about this. So Picard is the captain of my heart. But if I had to serve on a ship, I would want to serve under Janeway because she's so crazy. Like she's so I didn't mean that word. Let me try that again. She's so bonkers and she's so intense. And I think of the captains that I'm aware of, I could change my mind after watching Discovery or watching Deep Space Nine, but I would feel that like she gets the job done. She gets it done. So I would feel really safe. So that's my not super clear answer.
Oh no, Adrienne and Sophia, those were wonderful. Actually, those were wonderful. I'm glad
Yeah.
you like Picard so much. I love Picard as a captain.
Yeah, we're in agreement. Chris, I mean, our viewers know our favorites, but for the two ladies with us now, what's your favorite captain slash show?
Oh, for mine?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Star Trek: The Next Generation is is the show for my heart, and then Picard. Picard is my favorite captain, like absolutely. So I love how he approaches every situation and approaches life, and has a deep, deep kind of inner sense of his principles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we know Zach. Yeah, yeah, we know because you talk about it much.
All the time.
Yeah. Which is your
I mean,
favorite series, Zach? Which is your favorite captain?
well, I mean, my favorite series rhymes with Deep Space Nine. So there's that. My favorite captain, actually, though, is a surprise. So Sophia, I do love Cisco. There's a lot of things about Cisco that touch my heart. He's a family guy. He's a father. He is he knows how to treat women. He is a great, strong leader. He takes care of his people. He loves his people. But one thing I really like is he's not willing to question bad choices, right? Like he'll have these decisions that whether it's Starfleet or somebody else that makes it, and he'll challenge them and question, be like, why is it this way or whatever. He's done some questionable things as a captain, but all captains have, right? But in general, he's not afraid to do the right thing. And I think Chris and you and I've had this conversation before on the phone where, a lot of times doing the right thing is usually the most unpopular thing. Right. So I really enjoyed that. But Picard is my favorite captain. I grew up on TNG. I grew up with Picard. It wasn't until I got to college where I watched DS9 from beginning to end, because that's the way the show should be watched, is from all the way through, not just random episodes. That's where I fell in love with DS9. And now it's been, I won't say how many years since I graduated from college, but that many years since DS9 became the favorite. But TNG is it's like 1A, 1B with those two shows for me. So, yes, I know, Chris, I talk about DS9 all the time. I'm sorry.
It's all
I can't help
good.
it. I can't help it. I try not to, but I do. Anyways, so, all right. So we're going to jump into this. Again, thank you, Sophia and Adrienne, so much for doing this. We're looking forward to this. This is a very unique thing, I think, this episode, the chance we get an opportunity to jump into different episodes or different scenarios in Star Trek and say, well, wait a second, how would this captain have handled that? Or how would that captain have handled it? Almost like Star Trek's version of Marvel's What If, right? Like, what if this actually happened instead, right? So, Chris, how are we going to run this thing? Let's talk our watchers and listeners through how we're going to do these scenarios.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. And you gave a little preface earlier about this being a captain mashup. And as we know, like our legacy captains, we love our legacy captains like Sisko, Kirk, Picard, Janeway, Archer. And our captains, they all have very distinct, different personalities, very distinct, different, principles. And they're all, in different ways aligned with the Federation. All of these captains experience, like through their arcs, just significant challenges and are in scenarios where they have to make monumental decisions, right? So as we go through this, we're going to talk about some of these scenarios and circumstances that these captains find themselves in. And then we're going to insert potential different captains into those scenarios and talk about how would a different captain either make the same decision, make a different decision, and why. And it's going to be a fascinating kind of exploration. And kind of, I'll think a lot of back and forth and pushback, because these captains in each their own way demonstrate their individual styles of leadership and how do they kind of manifest themselves in this situation. And would the situations have been the same or completely different? It's going to be awesome.
It is. Yeah. So we're going to go back and forth, kind of like you said, Chris, and we're going to start off with the Where's Beverly podcast, and they get the first scenario. So Sophia, you're up first. We are going to give you the scenario from Voyager in the episode Resolutions. And I think you have a captain in mind that you want to dunk into the situation, pun intended.
Yes, I do. So for everyone who might forget what Resolutions is, it's one of Voyager's best episodes. It is the Chakotay bathtub episode, the episode in which Chakotay proves that he is the ultimate boyfriend and will build his girlfriend, Catherine Janeway's desired bathtub the minute that they are stuck on New Earth. So Sisko, I think, would behave quite differently than Catherine Janeway. Perhaps better for my heart, not better for the Star Trek franchise. So in the original episode, Janeway and Chakotay contract a virus where if they were to be removed from New Earth, they would die, but they have no symptoms if they stay in the environment of New Earth. Chakotay is very much cool. I live here now. This is fine. Janeway keeps on trying to get a solution to get off the ship. So I think that Sisko, First off, I don't think Cisco would really want to go to the planet that much. I think he just want to stay on the ship. But let's say he did go on the planet, contract an illness, get stuck with Chakotay. I think it would take him 5 minutes before he was like, I also live here now too. Time to spoon. And I think that they would just have a beautiful relationship, Cisco and Chakotay. They would just immediately be like, you know what? Like, F Starfleet, like, we don't like it that much anyway. Let's just live on this planet and raise our adopted monkey child together and just have a beautiful time. And that is law. That is, I will take no questions, concerns, or comments. It is exactly what would happen.
That's law. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Can I break the law for a second?
Possibly. We'll see.
So I'm thinking back to your comment you made about Cisco punching Q in the face. Would Cisco consider punching Chakotay in the face if he overstepped his line somewhere?
I think that they'd have a very wonderful talk about boundaries because these two characters are very good and they respect boundaries mostly. And I think that they just have like a cool ground rules. And then Cisco would be like, what are your thoughts on spooning? And Chakotay would be like, obviously pro spooning. And then, like, I don't think like first night there'd be spooning, but I think like third night there'd be spooning.
I
Cisco's
just
a
think
little
bold
spoon.
of you. I just think bold of you to assume that Cisco is a spooner. I will not elaborate.
You haven't
You're
seen
not gonna elaborate.
DS9. There's so much spooning. There's so much spooning on DS9. He, like, Cassidy and him aren't even a couple that long before there's just like spooning action.
Well, there is
So-
spooning. Like, I mean, Chief and his wife. That's a thing too, right? So
Mhm.
I would agree. There is some spooning on DS9.
Yeah, DS9 is a pro spooning show.
Gonna have a discussion about silverware. Yeah, that's interesting. I would say too, Cisco in a situation like that, right? In this episode where they have to stay on this planet or they die, right? I kind of feel like too, Cisco would be, hey, Chakotay, we got to figure out how to get off this place. We got to get back to Starfleet. You know, we gotta do this. We gotta, you know, we got to figure out a way to make this happen. I think for me, Cisco probably wouldn't give up hope until there really was no hope, right? Like he would be fighting constantly to figure out a way like, okay, how do we get out of here? How do we solve this issue? Um, from the Cisco that I can think of, I don't necessarily think he would just say, oh, well, we're here, we're done. That's it right away. Maybe over time he would, but maybe not in the very, very beginning.
I feel like if they just like brought Jake onto the planet, then he'd be like, okay, I'm fine. Like,
There
I
you go.
feel like
Yep.
the first season of DS9 is just him being like, I hate this space. I hate everybody on the ship, not my son, but I hate everything else. So I feel like if this was like season 1 Cisco, he'd be like, put my son on the planet too, and then my son can have a monkey brother. And then like,
Yeah.
Then they can all go on spirit journeys together with Chakotay. You know, once Chakotay teaches them. Yeah.
There you go.
It's the perfect scenario with the stock footage monkey. If you haven't watched Resolutions recently, rewatch it because I'm pretty sure they just reused the same stock footage clip of like a capuchin monkey, and it's the best director choice ever because it's terrible. And I just feel like Cisco and that stock footage monkey would be like pals. And yeah.
Would Cisco wear Dr. Quinn medicine woman hair?
Yes. Yes. So if you haven't watched Resolutions recently, the time between Janeway shedding her Starfleet uniform and wearing what I can only describe as space Dr. Quinn medicine woman outfits is like 3 seconds. So I feel like usually the DS9 uniform is like 90s bus seat, but like I feel like they would adopt like good old fashioned Dr. Quinn medicine woman outfits, and it would be wonderful.
Yeah, it always seemed like in DS9 that if one of the main characters was stuck on a planet somewhere, they would hold on to that uniform for forever. You know, like there's an episode where Bashir is on that planet trying to solve the quickening, right? And he's wearing that uniform for forever. He doesn't ever change or anything like that. I don't think he ever does. So yeah, that's an interesting question, Adrian, because I wonder how long Cisco would keep that uniform on before he finally was like, okay, yep, I'm adopting. We're gonna go make clothes somewhere out in the woods and start wearing, you know, more native attire or something.
I see Cisco in a vest.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
He'd be wearing a vest.
he does wear that vest thing in a pale moonlight too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the vest is true. Yeah.
2024, bring back vests for men.
Yes.
I don't think I could pull it off though. I don't think I could pull off the vest. I don't think I could do it.
You could
I
do
think
it.
you could pull off
You could
a
do it.
vest.
You
Yes.
think you think I could? I don't know. I don't know. I look back in my past of old pictures of me and I'm like, I don't know how I tried to pull it off. Like when I was in high school with the frosted tips, that was terrible. Oh my gosh. Those pictures, I'm like, burn all of them.
Things like frosted tips and vests are 98% like confidence and 2% love affair with the 90s. So I
Wow.
feel like if you have a 2% love with it for the 90s and 98% confidence, or reverse the two, 98% love of the 90s, 2% confidence, you too can pull off a vest and or frosted tips.
I think I was the 98% in love with the 90s and only 2% confidence. I don't think there was 98% confidence in me. That's for sure. Chris, you could pull the vest off. Hands down, my friend.
I have vests.
Yes, you could pull it off.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. That's good. That's a very interesting episode. And you said that was one of your favorite episodes, Sophia, or no?
Yes, because I firmly believe that Voyager should have ended at that episode, and Janeway and Chakotay should have stayed on the planet.
So I would say, like, I remember watching Voyager through from beginning to end for the very first time, and I'm thinking to myself, like, do you remember what season Resolutions was in?
Season 2, it's the second to last episode. Could
Okay.
have been a finale.
Yeah, I was thinking like I was in like season 4 of Voyager, and I'm like, okay, how many more episodes till we know they're gonna get home?
Hmm.
You know, where I was like, I just felt like at some point, especially in season 6 and 7, I'm like, they haven't gotten home yet. Like, there's some episodes that kind of dragging this out a bit, aren't they? Like, you know, yeah, I like Voyager. I do. Just it just kind of felt silly that it took as long as it did. I know they were way away from home, but yeah, that's a good point. That could have been. It would have been a better finale. Is this controversial to say that Voyager's finale, the way it like ended so abruptly, was not good?
Thank you. It's so weird.
Like they see Earth and oh, that's it, it's over. It's like, well, I want to see them get to Earth and start to reintegrate a little bit, and then have some type of like, you know, closing that resolves everything. I felt like Voyager was left unresolved.
Show me 7 of 9 getting arrested the minute that she shows up on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, it was too abrupt for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But real quick on Resolutions, did anyone else feel like bad for Chakotay? I always felt bad for him. Poor guy.
So bad.
Yeah.
So bad. He pours his heart out with this like myth story that he made up just to like insert himself into her life. They like do they waffle handhold, which is the most intimate form of handholding.
Yeah.
I mean, he makes her a headboard for her bed so she can sit up at night and read. He makes her a bathtub. And then she's like, Commander, let's like go back to the ship. Like it never happened. And it's just so sad because like in another life, and they were right there. And then you have to carry this, you know, like the rest of the way through the series. And I know that a lot of that was because, you know, understandably so, especially in the 90s, that Kate Mulgrew did not want to get involved with like a bunch of romance because if I completely understand that. But also as a fan, I was just like heartbroken for Chakotay and I just wanted them to kiss.
Cisco would have given him that, hands down. Cisco is the
Awesome.
boyfriend that Chakotay deserves.
Yeah. I always felt like or not Cisco, sorry. Janeway and Chakotay, it would have been nice to see them end up together at the end of the show versus Chakotay and Seven. That kind of came out of left field, I feel like a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but it just is kind of like, well, wait a second. They didn't really show a whole lot about them. It wasn't until, what was it, season 6 or 7 that they started to hint at stuff where Chakotay and Janeway had this really close relationship as first officers and captains do across the whole span of 7 years. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
So I would like to ask Chris. I think, Chris, you have a scenario about In the Pale Moonlight, which I know nothing about, but I'm excited to hear about because you're involving Kirk in this one. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Adrienne. And Zach, as I kind of talk about In the Pale Moonlight, like, please interject because you're gonna remember it more vividly than I will. Yes. But in the Pale Moonlight, like the overall arc of that episode is Cisco talking about how he can bring the Romulans, bringing the Romulans in to the Dominion war because they need another ally, so that they have enough strength so that they can fight the Dominion. And so Cisco's talking about kind of these decisions and actions that he's doing to bring in the Romulans, and a lot of them are kind of they're not on the up and up decisions. They're not quite moral decisions, and I think there's a loss of life on the Romulan side, so that the Romulans can be instigated to come into the war, right? So Cisco knowingly and consciously knows, hey, these Romulans, they're going to lose their life, they're going to die, but by this they'll be brought into the war, and then we're going to have a chance to kind of survive. So it's kind of, he makes an ethical kind of choice there, going, well, okay, these innocent people on the Romulan side, they're going to lose their lives, but this is going to help millions and billions of other people so that we can win the war. So in a nutshell, like, that's kind of Cisco's narration of the episode of what he's going to do. Anything to add to that, Zach, that summarize it right?
No, that was pretty good. Garrett gets involved, right? And they blow up the ship of this Romulan guy who came to, it was a Romulan senator or something like that, to come look at this little data rod that's supposed to have this real video, right, of a secret meeting between the Dominion and somebody else. I don't remember who that was off top. There's like the secret meeting, right? About how the Dominion were planning how to attack Romulus. That was the secret meeting. And so Cisco got all this fake thing made up and stuff. And there's that famous meme. You guys have probably seen it, where there's this Romulan holding. It's like, it's a fake. That's from that episode. And so Cisco knows he can't let this Romulan go back to Romulus and show that it's a fake. And Garrett gets involved, and just happens there to be an accident on this guy's ship as he leaves the station. It blows up, and then Cisco has his monologue, right, Chris? So it's like, I think you hit it right. It's just about Cisco basically not being the most moral and ethical captain at that moment, because he's doing everything in his power to what he believes is the right thing to do to save the Alpha Quadrant. So yeah.
And his monologue is fascinating because it's almost like a discussion with his conscience, right? And then at the end he says, I would do it again. So if I was thinking about Captain Kirk in that situation, and so I think Captain Kirk would find, because Captain Kirk is very charismatic. Captain Kirk feels like he's got to interject himself into the situation because he's got to do it himself. He's got charisma. He always feels like, I've got to do it myself. So he would find a way, I think, to disguise himself as a Romulan, because he's done that before. He would find a very influential Romulan lady in the Romulan government. He would romance the lady and convince them that, hey, it's really for the benefit of Romulus that you also ally with the Federation so that we can fight the Dominion. Captain Kirk wouldn't have sacrificed innocent lives. I don't think that's not in his principles or his personality to do that. But he would certainly disguise himself, feel like he was compelled to take on the responsibility himself to do the action because he's just so ambitious, and then he would find someone to romance. So that is what I feel Captain Kirk would do, and he would be successful because he always feels like he's the smartest person in the room, unless Spock is in there. But otherwise, he feels like he's the smartest person in the room. So that is what would happen.
That's epic. I love how you threw the romance a Romulan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come here. Come here, ma'am. Okay. We need to align together. We need to lie together. And I don't mean lying as in not telling the truth. We need to lie together. And he would convince her through many a Kirk ways. I think that was absolutely perfect. I don't know that I have any disagreement with that. I think that's probably exactly what Kirk would do.
No notes. No notes. That's exactly what he would do.
Yeah, no.
But would he what do you think his monologue would be, his captain's log? Do you think that he'd do the same thing as Cisco? Do you think he'd put some jazz hands into that captain's log? What do you think?
It would be an excellent captain's log for sure. Yeah. I'm not sure what he would say. He would have some flair in it, definitely. Yeah.
Like, would he rate the mission success versus his satisfaction separately? Like, would those things be two different things that he discussed in the mission log or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think this is completely realistic. And I love too how you mentioned, Chris, that like he wouldn't sacrifice any innocent lives, but he would have sexy times to get what he wanted. And the thing is I think a lot of people, this is a little bit of a beef that I have with the Star Trek fandom sometimes. I think people misremember Kirk sometimes. I think he has in a way become almost like a caricature of the character himself. And we always say like, oh, he was always trying to seduce women. He was always like super, super brash. And he was, but he wasn't. And most of the women that he was involved with, it was very respectful, and there was nothing really untowards about it at all. And he was brash, but he also got the job done, right? It wasn't he knew that he was good, but he was also not so arrogant that he wasn't constantly listening to what other people on his crew were saying. And we get this really in like you watch one episode of TOS and you get this. So I really like that you brought that up because I think sometimes Kirk gets a really bad rap as being like this terrible captain, but he really wasn't. And he was very principled. He was just principled in a very man that was written in 1960s America confidence would have, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to be a confident person. And part of his confidence comes from the fact that he's trained and the fact that he's surrounded himself with a good crew. And so in those regards, I think he's not a whole lot different from Picard or from Janeway or from Cisco. I think you just see Kirk engaging in some he is very popular with the ladies, and he does like to he likes to fight people sometimes, right? But like, I mean, sometimes that's necessary. I don't know. So I just really like that you brought that up, Chris. I agree.
Oh, thank you, Adrienne. Yeah, he's so ambitious. Kirk is, and as a delegator, he doesn't delegate because he likes, he feels like I've got to do it myself, and that's. Thank you for talking about Kirk because he is a good captain, like in his way. So it's fascinating to talk about him for sure.
I should have gone first because I can't follow all of you in my scenario. I can't do this. This is why people tune in because they want to hear Chris's eloquent answers and not my garbly-gook. But I kind of want to go off what you said, Adrienne, about that because Chris, I think you laid it out perfectly, like exactly how I think Kirk would have done it. Maybe this is wrong on me. It probably is wrong on me. I'm less interested in the captain's log. I'm more interested in the personal log in this case. Like, what would Kirk actually have to say outside of the official stuff? Like, it's his personal log. He's gonna, he's gonna spill the beans a little bit here, right? So but yeah, I think, and I love the way you said that, Adrienne. He's confident And I think you're right. People misremember how Kirk was. They have this persona that in their mind that's been built up through pop culture and our society. And Kirk fits some of that, but a lot of it he doesn't. A lot of it he's actually this. And if we really go back and look at how he was in TOS, we realize how many amazing things about Kirk there were. So well said, both of you.
Man, that is wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Adrienne, you have got maybe a super, super, super controversial little scenario here based on many who feel is one of the worst episodes of Star Trek, and that's the Enterprise finale. So I'll let you take it away with your captain of choices thrown into this scenario.
Okay, so I am not going to do a good job explaining the Enterprise finale because I have watched it twice and then I have read the Wikipedia page about the plot and I'm still a little confused. However, if you have seen the Enterprise finale, you know, and if you haven't seen it, I'll explain the bare minimum. Basically, the finale of Enterprise is set during TNG. It's actually set after the episode Pegasus, where Riker has like his old captain, and there's some, moral shenanigans that he has to figure out, and he's not really sure how he's going to proceed after this. And so he and Counselor Troy end up going to the holodeck and seeing how Archer and the crew of Enterprise dealt with a situation that, in my opinion, didn't have anything to do, that wasn't similar at all. And then we see sort of a scenario that Archer and his crew were in. I think it's like 6 or 7 years after the last actual, the penultimate episode of Enterprise. So basically, instead of them having their own finale, like in their own right, it's set 6 years later on the holodeck through the perspective of Riker and Troy. It's super weird. So my question is, how would Picard and or Janeway have handled having their finale stolen from them by crew members from another Star Trek show? So right off the bat, I'm thinking about Picard. Picard, it's his finale, right? It is all good things. He is on the vineyard in the future. And then all of a sudden, like Cisco and Jad Zudax, which I think is her name, show up. And he's just like, what the hell? Like, this is my vineyard. This is my hallucination, right? This is my Q trip. And I think he's going to start yelling at Q for messing up his own like cathartic journey. And then I think he's going to start yelling at them in Shakespearean monologues. So this is how I think Picard is going to handle the situation. Janeway is going to kind of just like side eye a little bit when she, at the end of Voyager, looks up and sees, Kirk and Uhura and Spock and Bones. And, she's not upset to meet them because they are legendary Star Trek Starfleet heroes, of course. But then she's going to decide that this is another one of Tom Paris and Harry Kim's holodeck program's gone wild, and she's just going to try and shut down the holodeck. If that doesn't work, she will stab them because they're macroviruses, right? So that's sort of my take on how I don't have anything super philosophical to say about this. But I welcome any thoughts or comments or pushback.
I love that you talked about Picard and that he would be speaking in Shakespeare, because at that moment, I think it would be Shakespeare. I think it would be something from Hamlet, and it would be the monologue from like, the existential, like to be or not to be from Hamlet, and saying, why are you doing this? So he has a right to exist. So it would definitely be Picard in Shakespeare doing that, connecting those. That is beautiful, Adrienne. Thank you.
Don't apologize for not being philosophical, because anybody who's listened to us long enough knows I'm the least philosophical of the two of us. So most of my answers usually involve, corny jokes and phaser shots. So I think that was perfect. I do. I think that was great. as soon as you started talking about Picard, I already started thinking about, well, what kind of like theater stuff would he start spouting off? And you stole it right out of my mind. That was perfect. I'm like, yep, Shakespeare time, and then you said it. That was great. Yeah, I don't have any real pushback on that at all. I think Picard would be pretty pissed. And Janeway, I don't, Janeway would be mad, but maybe almost like one of Harry and Tom's Hollow novels. That was perfect. Yep.
Very important question, Adrian. When Jadzia Dax shows up in the vineyard, would she be wearing a Party City wig like Deanna Troi?
No.
Because she wouldn't have stolen her wig like Marina Sirtis, and so that they had to use a Party City wig for that episode. That's my
is that the
favorite behind the
episode where-
scenes story.
Okay, I forgot about that. I forgot that she does that. Yeah, tell that story.
In that episode, Deanna Troy's hair looks different, and it's because it's actually a wig from Party City, and because they couldn't find the original wig that they had used in TNG, and Marina Sirtis is like, how could you have lost this wig? Like, you know, you're supposed to be a costume department, and then she found it later in her attic years later.
She happened to find it. Oh, that's epic. Yeah, that's true now that I think about it, because the Enterprise finale is not necessarily an episode I like to go back and rewatch over and over again. And honestly, I'm doing my watch through of Enterprise right now, and I'm dreading getting to the finale. It's just, when I do rewatches, I don't like to skip over all. I have to just kind of grin and bear it through all the bad episodes of a show. And I'm going to have to grin and bear it through the final episode. But yeah, I forgot that her hair did look different in that, didn't it? Yeah.
It's because it was a wig from Party City.
That's hilarious. I've never heard that story before. That's great.
Marina Sirtis has some good stories. Has some very good stories.
Yes, she does. Definitely some good stories. But yeah, no, that scenario was great. I mean, that final Enterprise episode was really hard to swallow for fans. Fans have always been up in arms about it and the way they ended it, like bringing somebody else in. I was also thinking too, when you brought up the idea, Adrian, about what would Picard think if, because the only show before Picard would have been TOS, what if Kirk had shown up, right? In his finale, and all of a sudden now Kirk's there, an older Kirk, obviously, because he's older. And how would that have played out for the TNG cast to say, hey, our show is being closed out by the TOS cast. We tried to separate ourselves, and now we've got TOS coming back in. I mean, I know they brought Dr. McCoy in and they brought Scotty in the show, but I felt like those were appropriate the way they put him in. Like was Dr. McCoy in no, he wasn't in the first episode of TNG, was he? But he was in early in the first season, I think.
I want to say it was one of the early episodes he was in. Yeah.
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 And then they brought Scotty in. I want to say it was like season 4, maybe, that episode Relics with the Dyson Sphere.
Mm-hmm.
But those felt appropriate. But if they brought in Kirk or some of the cast in for the finale, that would have been probably similar to Enterprise. It would have ruined. And All Good Things is an incredible finale. So, yeah, that was great.
So, Zach, I think your scenario is a very interesting TNG episode, Iborg, and you have a very particular captain for your scenario.
I do, yes. So I could do this 2 ways, the long answer, the short answer. And the way I drum on, I probably should do the short answer. So for me, the short, and it's not going to be philosophical either, Adrian, so don't worry about it because I'm right there. So I would say the short answer would be, as we know, in Iborg is the episode where they are able to get Hugh, and he's still attached to the collective, and they end up turning him into an individual, and he becomes good friends with Geordi and starts saying I and things like that, right? And Geordi even names him Hugh, right? And Picard is, we know in the real episode, right, that Picard is like, how could you name it, and blah, blah, blah. And then Picard goes to visit him, because we all know this is post Picard being Locutus, right? Because he even says, I'm Locutus of Borg, and blah, blah. So Picard gives him a leeway. Picard starts to feel bad for him and realize he was an individual, and this empathetic feeling and stuff. Cisco's going to walk in He's going to punch you in the face and say, put the virus in him. Let's go. Let's end this. It's over. How many lives are we going to save in the Alpha Quadrant by sending this one person back? Hey, if he was willing to lie and to get the Romulans in, and he was willing to live with his lying, his cheating, his stealing, whatever, all the things a part of his monologue, which, is one of the most, probably one of the most quoted monologues in Star Trek. If he's willing to do that to bring the Romulans into this war, you don't think that he would jump at a chance to end the Borg, who are the mortal enemy of the Federation? Oh, by the way, the Borg killed his friggin' wife. So if he does this, guess what? Jennifer Sisko never dies because there's no Battle of Wolf 35. Well, no, sorry, disregard. This is after Battle of Wolf 359, isn't it? Because Sisko was Locutus already. So my apologies. I guess I got it switched around. Let's just say it happened before then, though. If he had taken out the Borg in a situation, then Jennifer may never have died had the whole Locutus thing not happened. So knowing his hatred for Locutus from the pilot episode of DS9, and knowing his hatred for the Borg because the Borg / Locutus killed his wife, he wouldn't even think twice about it. He wouldn't get anywhere near the chance to attach himself in a personal relationship with Hugh. It'd be like, nope, put the virus in him. He's gone. He wouldn't have the fight with Admiral Nechayev over it. He would just do it because he knows it's the right thing to do, and it would save millions of lives in the Federation. We'd never have Star Trek First Contact. I mean, I could go on, and that's my short answer.
Zach, it sounds like you're proposing that Sisko would have channeled a little bit of his inner Janeway, and he would have just seen this come up on the pad and just said, delete the Borg.
Yeah,
And
there you
then
go.
just delete the Borg.
Yep.
Unnecessary. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. I don't think Sisko gets attached to his crew, right? In DS9. There's a good relationship there. I do think that the TNG bridge crew are closer than the DS9 bridge crew as far as relationships maybe go, to a certain extent. But the other characters that you see in DS9, it's not like he has this super attachment to them. So I think for me, Sisko's good at being able to distinguish someone who's maybe just a colleague or someone he's, had an acquaintance with versus somebody who he's really close and friends with. And I don't think he allows Hugh to get close enough to him because he sees the Borg as an enemy. Why would he want anything to do with this thing? Like, no, put the virus in him, send him back, start the chain reaction. Let's freaking end this. We don't need the Borg around. Like, he has some serious PTSD from the Battle of Wolf 359 and losing his wife and almost his son. Why the heck would he keep Hugh around or the Borg around? So to me, it's somewhat of a simple answer. I'm curious on your guys' thoughts if you think he would have done something different.
Zach, yeah, I'm thinking along very similar lines. I'm not sure he would have personally gone in the same room as Hugh, but he absolutely would have done very similar actions. I think he would have asked, "Hey, is there any way to intensify the virus?" And then still either give that to Hugh, get Hugh back to the Borg as fast as he could. He would call Admiral Nechayev and say, "Hey, look what I've done. Now's our opportunity to completely obliterate the Borg from existence." Because when Sisko gets in that frame of mode, right? There was that officer that betrayed him, right? And so
Eddington,
and so he became very, very obsessed and narrow focused on that. So he's going to be obsessed by this moment. He's gonna seize the moment, intensify the virus, call Admiral Nechayev, get all the forces ready so that they can just eliminate the Borg for existence, and any advantage that he can find or any way that way to intensify the end of the Borg, he's gonna do. So I completely agree, Zach.
that was awesome. Thank you, Chris. And you as soon as you started talking about when he gets hyper focused on, an individual person, he brought up Eddington. That's what I was thinking, and I hadn't brought that up. That if he was so hyper focused on the Maquis, who were Federation citizens attempting to secure their own place from the Cardassians along the demilitarized zone, don't you think that the alien race, if you want to really call them that, Borg, who were responsible for killing his wife, he wouldn't have some type of, Captain Ahab vendetta against them and just go full nuclear and be like, yep. And I'm glad he said intensify the virus.
Yeah.
Wipe them out from existence, just like in Year of Hell, right? They're gonna wipe something completely out of existence. They're gone. The Borg are gone.
But after he does that, though, I think he resigns because he's going to resign from Starfleet because that kind of completes the cycle with his wife, right? So he's done.
I don't know that I agree that he would resign from Starfleet, but that could certainly be an out for him if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ladies,
I
what do you
agree
think?
with you. Yeah, Chris, I agree that I feel like he'd do that. Then he'd be like, I'm done. I'm done with Starfleet. I'm going to go to New Earth with Chakotay. But what do you think, Zach, in terms of like with Hugh, I completely agree that he'd do that. How do you think Cisco would have reacted to Janeway being like, this is my new friend, Seven of Nine. Yes, that she's a deadly Borg, but we're going to deborg her a little bit. She's still going to want to kill us all the time, but that's fine because we're going to teach her a little bit of like not killing people. How do you think Cisco would have reacted to finding out Janeway did that with Seven of Nine?
5 words, not a chance in hell. There is not a chance that he's going to allow a former Borg drone onto a ship with him. There is no way, because odds are at some point he's going to find her and choke her out in her sleep or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's no way that he's going to live with a Borg drone around. No, having gone through what he did with his wife being killed by the Borg, there's not a chance.
Straight in the airlock immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And if he was the first officer on Voyager and Janeway was a captain, right? In this case, so put Cisco where Chakotay is in Scorpion Part 1 and 2. He's going full on mutiny. Nope, not happen, Captain. We're relieving you of command. What, are you out of your friggin' mind? You're gonna bring a Borg on here? We're working with the Borg. Like, have you lost your marbles? Not happening. Not happening. So that's a very interesting question, Sophia. I like that. Adrienne, what about you? Any input on that scenario?
I have no input, but I do have a question.
Yes.
Do we think if Janeway and Cisco were each other's respective captain and first officer, would Voyager / Deep Space Nine just have like imploded like in the very first episode? Like, I think it sounds like they're both very, I mean, I'm thinking of all the stuff you guys are saying because I haven't seen Deep Space Nine, but everything you're saying about Cisco, it really is reminiscent of Janeway in Equinox, like where she's just like full of rage and very understandable rage, but that rage sort of ends up coloring her, so it sort of bypasses her normal like moral and ethics code because the other person has violated that code so intensely. And so it sounds like Cisco is similar in some ways. I don't want to say that they're the same, but maybe they both have this sort of like quality. And so and now I'm just thinking, oh no, if Cisco was Janeway's first officer or if she was his, I think there wouldn't have been a show because they just would have like blown each other up like in the first episode.
Yeah, I think you're right. You'll learn this when you do watch DS9. There's Cisco is like the episode with Eddington or episodes with Eddington. Cisco doesn't like the fact that he was so grossly fooled right in front of his eyes and he couldn't see it coming. Cisco I think prides himself, and guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Cisco prides himself on being able to read people and not be easily fooled and manipulated. And he has this personal code, right? That Eddington violates so badly and betrays him, and more importantly, betrays the uniform. Because there's an episode called For the Uniform, right? And so to me, I think you're probably right. They probably would implode because Cisco just can't get over the fact of how badly he was fooled and played from the very beginning and didn't see it coming. And Janeway would be the exact same way. So I think there's a lot of similarity between Cisco and Janeway that people don't realize. So I'm glad you brought that up.
They're clearly both firstborn children. Like that, this is I don't know if this is true or not, but this is just like my headcanon, at least, is that Janeway's like an oldest born daughter. And so she's just like this, the guilt is always there. And it kind of sounds like Cisco's a little bit of the same way. Like just that from a young age, that internalized, like I am responsible for everyone and all of their feelings and all of their safety all of the time, kind of. And so then when a person like that snaps, they really, really snap. And I
Yeah.
think you kind of get that. Yeah.
You will see that in DS9. Cisco snaps a few times, and it ain't pretty for the other people on the other end. It really isn't. Although I will say, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit trail, because if I do, Chris, this will turn into a D Space Nine episode. But I feel like, and you talked about, Chris, right? How if the Borg were ended, he would resign from Starfleet, right? Because he's kind of completed the circle with his wife. I feel like up until Cassidy comes around, that rage exists so heavily in Cisco, and then Cassidy kind of lightens it a little bit. I mean, it's still there, and especially after Cassidy kind of betrays him a little bit with the whole Maquis thing. But overall, I feel like she kind of tames that fire in him a little bit once she comes into the show. I don't know, Sophia or Chris, if you kind of felt that way at all about that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, we know Cisco is a very loving person, right? With his wife and his son. So he's got that dynamic about him, that part of him. Um, Cassidy, maybe for me, maybe it's not taming it, but because Cassidy is there, that'll bring that part of his personality out more, because she's there. But I always feel that it's not taming the rage, because Cisco has integrated that rage in him. That rage is there, and he can bring it out like in a moment. So it's just when Cassidy's there, he's got this. That's the loving part of Cisco that's there to be with Cassidy. So yeah, but that's a great point, Zach. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, Sophia, what about you?
I also think too, like you're so right, Chris, where like there's so much love for Cassidy, but I think that she also challenges him and she sees that rage and she accepts it. But part of her is also like, can you just chill out like a little bit? Like, just enjoy this. Like, yes, I know that you have a lot going on, but like, we're eating dinner right now. Stop it. And he listens to her and he respects her. And because she's very much her own person, she has her own stuff going on. Like they're not in each other's faces all the time. And because she's gone so much of the time, when she comes back, it does allow him to kind of reframe and be like, okay, I'm going to tone down the rage a little bit so we can enjoy this great meal that I just made.
Yeah, that's a good point. I loved Cassidy quite a bit. I wish we had gotten more of her, because I really felt like she balanced Cisco a lot.
Oh,
And
yes.
they were a wonderful, wonderful couple. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. That was a great scenario. Great discussion there. Let's go back to you, Sophia, because we've got another scenario. I believe this episode. Is this a Voyager episode again?
This is a Deep Space
Deep
Nine
Space
episode.
Nine. That's right. Deep Space Nine.
Mhm.
How did I not know that? My gosh. So I'm gonna have my DS9 card pulled. Okay, so change of heart with a particular captain that you wanted to throw in here.
So Change of Heart is a late season 6 episode um in which Worf and Jadzia go on a mission together to try and find an operative who is going to, oh, I forget the details because I just have very like tunnel vision about this episode because I love it for a specific reason. But they're trying to find somebody who's going to like testify or something. So they go on this mission. They're like in the jungle. They have to try and find this operative who's in hiding, bring him back to DS9 safely. But when they're trying to find this operative, Jadzia gets mortally injured, and Worf has to make a decision. Does he leave her there? Which she is saying, leave me here. I am not, like, I'm going to impede the mission. You go find this operative and then send a team after me. he thinks about doing that, but then he actually goes back for her, saves her, and the operative dies in the process, and that mission is completely jeopardized. And afterwards, so Jadzia is okay for like 5 episodes. Season 7 of DS9 does not exist. And then Cisco is quite upset with Worf because this mission was jeopardized. And he says, because of this, like, I'm telling Starfleet on you, you will never be promoted. Like, you're not going to get fired from Starfleet, but this is going to affect your career. But then he also said, I would have done the same thing. I would have absolutely done the same thing. But then he also peppers in, you and Jadzia are never going on missions again with each other. Like, absolutely not. So my thought is, how would Picard deal with this? And I thought it would be interesting because Picard knows Worf. I think Picard Worf is very, like, TNG Worf is very different than DS9 Worf. I love DS9 Worf. I think Worf was misused in TNG, like, he was underused. And I think as soon as he met Jadzia, it was just power couple. I love them together. But I think that Picard, right off the bat, this scenario would never have happened because he would have seen Picard or Worf and Jadzia getting together and been like, no, absolutely not. Worf cannot have happiness at all. No marriage, no relationship, goodbye, and immediately either sends Jadzia somewhere else or sends Worf somewhere else. But let's say they were able to go on that journey together, and then that same thing happened. I feel like Picard would have been much harsher on Worf. I feel like he would have been like, of course I would have let my partner die because of Starfleet. And I think that he would have done like a Starfleet court-martial type thing. I think he could have even encouraged Worf to leave. I do not think that he would have shown the same empathy that Cisco did to Worf, because I think Picard wouldn't be able to fathom making that personal decision and allowing that to jeopardize a mission. I don't think Picard would have done that.
Hard disagree. I'm just gonna jump myself right in here.
I could read it
Hard
on your
disagree.
face. I could read it on your face, Adrienne.
Hard disagree. I feel like you're saying this to hurt me, Sophia. Okay.
Just a little bit.
Let's start with everything that you said that was wrong. Okay.
Okay.
So, first of all, I do agree with you that I don't think they ever would have gone on a mission together to begin with. I think Picard would have said, you're in a relationship, it's inappropriate. Like, you're not, it's not, you're not going to be able to think clearly. I'm going to send you with someone else. So I do agree with you there, but I don't think Picard would say, oh, I don't want you to be happy. You shouldn't even be in a relationship at all.
Have you seen TNG?
Yes. Yes. But Picard doesn't have an issue with people. He doesn't have an issue with Riker and Troy having a relationship. He doesn't have an issue with Worf and Troy having a relationship. And I do very much think that Picard would empathize very strongly with this situation. We see this. In fact, it's the main reason why he doesn't end up pursuing a relationship with Nella Darren in Lessons, and why he says one of the main reasons he never ends up pursuing a relationship with Beverly is because he knows that he wouldn't be able to choose between his duty and the person that he loves, and he doesn't want to have to make that decision because it's such a terrible decision to make. So I think he would very much empathize with Worf. I do think he would reprimand him, absolutely, because he jeopardized the mission. I think that's absolutely clear. I think he would have done the same thing that Cisco did in that regards. And then I, honest to God, think he would say, I'm reprimanding you. I'm putting you on like whatever the Starfleet equivalent of like unpaid leave for a month is. And then I think he would say, oh, and one more thing, Mr. Worf, this reprimand stays between us. I don't even think he would send it to Starfleet. I don't. But I think he would make it clear that if it ever happened again, like, he was gone. I do think that. I think he would say, if this ever happens again, like this will never happen again. But I do think that Picard is unnecessarily I think all the captains get mischaracterized sometimes. I think Picard has incredible empathy. And I think it's because of his incredible empathy that he oftentimes can sort of distance himself from people and be afraid of, of the depths of what that can entail. So I vehemently disagree with you, but I love you anyway. But I'm interested to see what Chris and Zach think about this scenario.
What do you think, Zach?
So yeah, Sophia, I'm gonna have to agree with Adrian a little bit on this. Although Adrian, I have to disagree with you on one thing. I think Picard would put the reprimand in his record, and the reason why is because he was reprimanded Data before, and that got put into his official logs and stuff. So I do think he would follow through with the reprimand, and it would go into Worf's records. But maybe he would write the reprimand in a way that wouldn't be detrimental to Worf's career, so that he would still be getting the discipline that he feel like he deserves, but it's not going to completely destroy Worf or destroy his career because of the empathy that he has. And I do agree with you, Adrian, that if the roles had been reversed and it had been Picard and Beverly on the mission, Picard would have absolutely saved Beverly because he has feelings for her, but she's also a close friend, and he served with her husband, and there's Wesley, and there's so much close knitness, if that's even a word, between the two of them. And so I think that's probably where it would have stood. I think that you're right. Picard does have incredible empathy for folks, which is what makes him, as you've pointed out in the past on our podcast, Chris, what makes him such a good diplomat, right? And the ability to negotiate and everything as the captain of Starfleet's, flagship. So I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Wow, this is fascinating. I love it. So Picard has a very keen understanding of who Worf is, right? Because Picard is very close to Worf, helped Worf with all of Worf's family matters, and is like essentially like Worf, one of Worf's most like trusted people. So he has a sense of what honor means to Worf, what companionship means to Worf. So I feel Picard would have totally understood Worf's decision at the moment. I also agree Picard probably would have never let them go like together, like on a mission. And Picard would have had one of those conversations with Mr. Worf where you feel like, oh, Picard gives that "I'm disappointed in you," like Mr. Worf like conversation, and like which he's done before. And in regards to the reprimand, I'm conflicted. I think Picard would have had to write it. I don't know that he would have sent it either. It might have been one of those things where he like leaves it. He writes the report, thinks about whether he's ever going to actually send it to Starfleet or not. I feel like maybe he doesn't send it, and then Admiral Nechayev like reviews his logs like a few years later and says, "What happened here, Picard? This is another reason, like, you're not doing the right things, Picard. Why didn't you send in this reprimand to Mr. Worf?" And then so I feel like, yeah, I don't know that he would have actually sent the reprimand in. I think he would have wrote it, had that conversation with Worf, like, "Hey, I'm kind of disappointed, and this is why, but I understand. I would have done the same thing," and he would have kind of left it. It's great.
He reminds me, I think he would have done what you see sometimes these like judges will do sometimes, where someone has been arrested for something and they'll be in front of the judge, and the judge will say, "Okay, you have been charged with XYZ, and I have to charge you with XYZ. All right, everyone clear on that? Sentencing. Sentence has been served. Have a nice day." Like, it's kind of like I have to make a stand here because I will get in trouble if I don't. But in terms of any sort of actual punishment coming from that, I think Picard would say that his punishment was almost losing Jadzia, right? His punishment was understanding now that this is why we don't go on missions together, right? This is why I didn't want the two of you to go, and that's punishment enough. We'll never speak of it again. That's it.
That's so interesting because I feel like Picard has empathy. I don't think he's ever had empathy for Worf, at least in a professional aspect. I think that, like you said, Chris, he definitely, in a personal aspect, absolutely. And he does become a confidant for Worf, but in a professional aspect, and this becomes a professional concern, he constantly undermines Worf's authority. He constantly ignores Worf's professional suggestions. And I feel like while he might think that he could have done something similar, I think this could be the last straw professionally. And he just loses that professional empathy and some of the personal empathy that he has for Worf because he brought personal problems into the workplace and it became a professional issue. And I think that that's where Picard would have a lot of trouble rectifying that. Whereas with Cisco, he's saying, oh, like, like I have to reprimand you, but I would have done the same thing. I think even though Picard knows he could have done something similar, he's put precautions in place so he would never do that because he thinks it's unacceptable. And I think he would judge Worf harshly because of how Picard has had to sacrifice so much so this wouldn't happen. He foresees this as a problem, so he's not doing things. But Worf knew it could be a problem, did it anyway. Starfleet suffered as a result. So I could see Picard just going really, really harsh and making an example of Worf because of that.
Wow, how interesting. This doesn't quite go to the when I'm thinking about like Picard and Worf. Picard, so both have extremely strong principles, right? Picard recognizes Picard, I feel like if he makes him, he's very hard on himself. Picard is very hard on himself, right? He recognizes that Worf has those same similar principles and has a high sense of honor. But it might, and kind of pulling off of what you're thinking, Sophia, Worf is kind of like a reflection to Picard of what a very, very kind of principled individual like looks like. There was it was one of the movies, I don't remember if it was First Contact or whatever, but there's a brief exchange with Picard and Worf, and it's a very, very terse kind of exchange. I think like there's a disagreement, and then they got to kind of circle back, and then Picard apologizes, right? But
yeah, First Contact.
Yeah. Picard is extremely hard on himself, and if he would see a reflection of himself like composed in a different individual, he might intuitively feel that connection on like, why did you make that decision? That is against, like, that decision you made is against like who you are. And so he would maybe reflexively react very, very, very harshly, not out of discompassion, but it's just be like a reflexive kind of reaction. But that's interesting. I was pulling off of what you were saying.
I like the way that you phrase that though, and that it makes a lot more sense that he would react like reactionary because of his own moral compass and feeling disappointed in somebody who has that similar morals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, that was good. That was really, really good.
Sophia and I will be discussing that further later, where I will be I will be asking her privately, when is the last time you've seen season 6 and season 7 of TNG? And did you actually watch them, or did you just read the Wikipedia page?
Ooh, we're getting a little salty action going on in there. That's
so
good.
Sophia has a history. Sophia has a history of I love Sophia. Sophia has a history of being like, I can't stand this character because they did this thing in this episode. And then 2 years, and I'm thinking, I don't really remember that happening, but maybe, I don't know, whatever. And then 2 years later, she's like, so I watched that episode and I thought it was such a great episode. And it was all about this and this. And I'm like, so 2 years ago, I have the receipts. You said, this is such a good example of misogyny in Star Trek. But today you're like, oh, what a great example of relationship joy. And I'm like, what? And then she'll admit she never actually watched the episode.
I had gaslit myself and Adrienne to thinking that I had seen Sub Rosa for 5 years.
And more.
I just watched it for the first time last year.
And more. Like most of TNG and quite a bit of Voyager.
My gosh. That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Yeah, it's amazing sometimes when we watch something or we think we watch something, we think we know it, and then we go back and watch it again and we're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
This isn't anything I remember this it being like, you know. That's happened to me on more than one occasion. I hate to admit that I may have done that a few times myself. We probably all have at some point, but yeah, it's interesting.
I do that all
Totally
the time.
fine. Totally fine. Sophia does it all the time. I have done it as well, but not to the extent. So, Chris, I have a question for you. You have a very interesting scenario regarding everyone's favorite nightmare twin, Tuvix. If you would care to share for the class.
Oh, thank you, Adrienne. Oh,
Good luck, Chris. Good luck on this one.
Oh no, this is like a fascinating one, right? So much controversy over this one, but this is where Tuvix from Voyager, Neelix and Tuvok are caught in another transporter malfunction as yet in Star Trek, and they are melded into one being, one person named Tuvix. And you know, we're not sure like what happens to Neelix and to Tuvok, but they are combined, their personalities are combined, their characters are combined. So Tuvix is now interacting with the crew. He's a sentient like being. The question becomes, how do we get Neelix and Tuvok back? If we can get them back. At the end of that episode, you know, after Tuvix has had a while to kind of interact with the crew, Janeway has to make the decision, hey, let's bring Neelix and Tuvok back, and I'm going to make the decision, get him back. This is kind of against all of the other thoughts of the crew, especially the doctor, right? I think the doctor has some strong words near the end to Captain Janeway, say, hey, I can't like endorse this decision like at all, because you're in essence like ending one life for the sake of two others. Fascinating discussion. So Janeway makes that decision, and one like weight of, you know, such the weight of that decision on Janeway, because she's not only considering the friends and the crewmen that were lost, but the skill set, the individual skill sets of those crewmen to help them get back to the Alpha Quadrant, because that combination of skill sets might not be there with Tuvix. So I love that her face like at the end of the episode, because she knows she's had to make that decision and how it's weighed on her. So that was Janeway's decision. And my question is, how would every other captain have, what decision would they have made? And for me, this is what I think. I'm just curious to hear from the group. I think every other captain would have probably arrived at the same conclusion. I think possibly they may have, there might have been some different nuances of timing and how it was carried out. So, you know, maybe one of the captains, Kirk or Picard, would have thought, well, let's just keep them in like a transporter suspension for a while until we figure out how to get Tuvok and Neelix back. Yeah, so I'm curious to hear other thoughts on timing and when people would have made the decisions. You know, Janeway waited, kind of protracted that decision out, but when would the other captains have made that decision? Or would they have made a different decision?
Who do you think would have done it the fastest Chris?
Kirk. I think he would have done it the fastest. Like, the people close to Kirk, are very important. So if you like McCoy and Spock, right? If they had been those individuals, Kirk would have been like, all right, Scotty, we got to figure this out now. Like, let's keep them in transporter suspension and let's do this. So I think Kirk would have done it the fastest. Picard, I think Picard might have taken a while too, because he's got to go through his own kind of internal moral principles and compass and figure out what's the right thing like to do in that circumstance. And probably he has to go like read some Shakespeare to figure it out. So second fastest, I think either Archer. You think Archer?
Yeah, I
Zach,
do.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think Archer.
Archer.
Yeah, I think I could see Archer saying something to the effect of, "I've got to complete my mission, and I need Tuvok and Neelix to do it. So back on the pad, let's go." I mean, he didn't do it right away in similitude with the clone trip, but that's because it took a while. Dr. Phlox had to do his thing to get the stuff to make Trip better, and they called him Sim, I think was the character's name. They put Sim to work a little bit, and he wrestled a little bit. But I think if what Archer learned from that scenario, he would have taken and been like, "Yep, you're a sentient life form, but you have taken away my crew members." So,
where's Cisco fit in there? If anyone can think.
See, I think Cisco would have been the fastest.
Yeah.
I agree that Kirk would be pretty darn fast, but I feel like Cisco would just go in and be like, no, and then just immediately like, no, what is this? I don't like this. Put it back. Like, no, he wouldn't consult with other people. He'd be like, wrong. And then I feel like Kirk would probably like try and find a solution, but I think he'd do it just a little bit slower, but only because Cisco would be like, no, immediately. But I completely agree that like Picard would probably be the slowest, and I do agree that like there should be some Shakespeare involved first.
what about you, Adrienne?
This is a hard one. I do agree that they all would have reached the same decision. I don't see, and I've thought about this, it's such a good, the most controversial episodes of Star Trek are always my favorite, because that means that question hits something really, really deep, right? Where we don't know what we would do, right? And it's uncomfortable to think about. And I've thought about this even for myself. And I think, yes, by separating them, you essentially kill Tuvix. But if you don't, Tuvok and Neelix have died. They don't exist as Tuvix. Tuvix is a completely different person. It's not like they both get to live as two people in one body now. That's not the situation, right? So it's very much like someone's going to die. These two people have already died. These are the people that we had on our crew to begin with. And so the least damaging choice, there's no good choice here, right? But the least damaging choice is to reverse it. And I think that I don't understand why people are like murderer. And I don't get that. But I do think they would all reach the same decision. I don't know about Cisco, but considering he punched Q in the face, I think I agree with Sophia that maybe he would have been the first to be like, absolutely not. I do not have time for this. And I think Kirk would struggle with it but I do think he'd be pretty quick. I think he would say, oh, I don't know what to do. Bones, what do you think? And he would say, I think this. And he'd be like, yeah, well, clearly we have to have him back. Okay, make it work, figure it out. Right. So, and I think he would be mostly okay with it. I think Picard would initially have one idea, probably of reverting them back immediately. But then I think he would talk to Beverly about it, and Beverly would have a lot of qualms about this, as much, if not more so than the doctor. And I think she would say, we can't just, I as a medical professional cannot make this person cease to exist. even though I'm aware of the fact that we've lost these two other people, but I think she would say they're already gone.
Yeah.
Let's not add insult to injury, but I think that's what she would say. And then I think that would really throw him for a loop. I think he'd be really upset with her because he knows that she has a point and he doesn't want to think that it's more complicated than it is. And then I think he would retreat to his ready room for like the rest of the episode. And we wouldn't even see him. I think it would just be this big, huge decision. And then I do think at the end of that, Beverly would find a way to like maintain a sample of Tuvix's DNA and then end up making a Tuvix. Like, I just think that's how TNG would have resolved that. And then we would have this weird, like, third character that was like an amalgamation of the other ones. But yeah, I do think they all would have arrived at the same conclusion. And I think it is a terrible, no good, very bad situation to be in. It is absolutely a catch-22. But I do think most people would probably make the same decision. It's not even that Tuvok and Neelix agreed to this, right? They didn't say, we'll sacrifice ourselves for a third person. It was I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I do think, I think I agree with you, Chris. They would have all done the same thing.
Adrienne, thank you for bringing up Beverly in this. Actually, I did not even think about that. Do you think that would that have permanently changed the relationship between Picard and Beverly? I mean, Beverly has, she's a medical doctor. She's a mother. She's got this strong sense of like compassion, right? But so does Picard. But that he has to make this decision. So Beverly, like, kind of seeing that, oh, okay, he's going to make this decision. He has made this decision to end one sentient being, would that have permanently changed like their relationship? I mean, they end up getting married, like, but after, if that would have happened, I wonder what would have happened between them.
I don't think so. I think there are other choices that he did make that are arguably worse than a hypothetical Tuvix situation. I think she would have been really upset with him for a while, but that was just the nature of their relationship. And one thing I really, really love and respect so much and value so much about Star Trek is that these characters are able to be people with very different ideas about the way things should be done, but they often share values. And it's in that point that they maintain relationships with each other and maintain respectful interactions with each other. And so very, very often, everyone on the crew has the same value. They all value life and all of these things, but they have very vastly different ideas about how those things should be done, as we all do. And I think ultimately at the end, it wouldn't have affected them because I think Picard and Beverly, just like everyone else really, they know that at the end of the day, they both truly, truly believe in doing what is the right thing, but they may disagree on how that looks or what that even is. But they know that to like wax a little poetically, they know that their hearts are in the right place. And so I think Beverly would not respect Picard if he did anything other than what he believed was the right thing to do, and vice versa. But I don't know. What do y'all think?
The only thing I think you left out with Picard is that before he retreats to his ready room, they all go to the conference room. He'd sit back and go, suggestions. He'd take everything in, right, as he usually does. He'd get the suggestions. He'd get ready to go to his ready room. Then he'd get up. He'd do the Picard maneuver, with the uniform, pull down the elastic, and then he'd retreat to his ready room. That's the only thing I could think of because he does do. That's one good thing about Picard was that I actually liked way more than Cisco. Cisco's a little bit more, we're just going to do this because this is my decision, versus Picard will weigh his options. He'll get input from his crew because they all have varying opinions and different viewpoints. And I think a good leader should gather all of the information before making especially a big decision, like something like a Tuvix scenario. Right. So, but yeah, I would agree. I think he would arrive at the same conclusion, but him and his relationship with Beverly, I think would absolutely play into this. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. All right. I have we'll go to, well, I think this will be a very lighter topic. I think this will be good. So I have a question. I'm looking forward to this. I have a question for Adrienne, and this is an episode from TNG, Sub Rosa. And so we'll switch it up. So I think you were thinking not between Beverly and Picard as the dynamic, but Spock and Kirk as the dynamic. So Adrienne, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I just would like to begin by saying that I am sorry for anyone who I offend, but not that sorry, or else I wouldn't do it. Okay, so if anyone has not seen the episode Sub Rosa, or it's been a long time, basically what happens in Sub Rosa is they are on a colony planet that's sort of like a strange recreation of like 18th century Scotland, because why not? And Beverly is there attending her grandmother's funeral. She inherits the house of her grandmother, and there's a strange little like metal candle-y thing there. And there is this ghost, I'm using air quotations here. There is a ghost named Ronan who comes out of this receptacle and is like, I've been in love with the women in your family for like 850 years. And I love you. And he's sort of what ends up taking place is can really only be described as assaulty. It's not great, but she ends up essentially like addicted to his energy. And so it's this very uncomfortable sort of also wacky gothic type of thing. It's strange. But in the end, she says she quit Starfleet and she's like, I'm just gonna stay on this planet. Like, who cares about being a doctor? Like herbal tea for everybody, and just forget it. I'm gonna live with my new like fancy man, Ronan. Also, my eyes have changed colors. That's fine. No need to worry about that. And Picard really doesn't know what to do. And Deanna Troi, in a what is actually a very respectful way, encourages him to respect her decision, that we don't know what she's going through. Perhaps this is just a life change that she needs. But Picard, being Picard and being a good friend, also knows she's not acting in a way that is there. This is very red flaggish. It's very, very strange. So he follows her down to the planet. He just makes sure one more time. He just wants to make absolutely sure that this is her decision, that she's making of her own free will, that there's nothing else going on here. And Ronan shows up and is like, yeah, we're going to get married. Sucks to be you, bald man. And then like attacks Picard. And it's only then that Beverly sort of snaps out of it. And, and somewhere in there, Nana's body gets possessed and there's phaser fire. So that is Sub Rosa. And my question is, how would Kirk respond if they went to Vulcan and Kirk's like Vulcan grandmother has died and he's inherited this candle and is like, screw Starfleet, I'm gonna live on Vulcan with my fancy man Ronan from like the Scottish ghost, right? Like, how would Kirk respond to that? And I think Kirk would be like, the hell you are, Spock. I just think immediate no from Kirk. I think he's going to go down there and be like, show me this candle. I think he's going to steal the candle from Spock. I think he's going to try and like set the candle on fire. When that doesn't happen, I think he's going to add lighter fuel. I think that's still not going to happen. I think then Kirk is going to say, what this candle needs to really be destroyed is, good old fashioned grit and American ingenuity. And he's going to wrap it in a vintage American flag and see if that'll like make it combust, right? He's going to try everything. I don't think he's going to just let Spock kind of disappear into this weird sort of strange thing, because he's clearly acting in a way that's not him, and he knows that. He absolutely knows that. So I do think other people on the ship are going to encourage Kirk to respect Spock's decision. But I also think they're all worried about him. I think this is a very, uncharacteristic thing. But ultimately, I think Kirk is just absolutely not having it. And, at the very end of the episode, Spock is back to his usual stoic self, and he just sort of turns and says, thank you, Captain. And that's it, right? Like fade to black. And that's sort of my take on that. But I'm curious to see I think Picard tries really hard to respect Beverly, and and her decision, which is nice. I just don't think Kirk would do that. Subsequently, I don't think Janeway or Cisco, I think both of them would react similarly to Kirk. I think they would be like, absolutely not. You're coming home with me. Like, sedate him. Like, let's go. Come on. Yeah. So I'm curious though as to your thoughts.
I thought of two things as you were talking about that. First of all, I agree. Yes, I don't think Kirk would let, basically his best friend and his first officer leave off to this candle thing. First thing, Chekhov would say something to the effect that candle was made in Russia by Russians. They were originally made by Russians, so that would be a thing. And then the second thing is Spock being pulled by this candle, right? This new ghost or whatever. It would mess him up emotionally, and we would get a mock time part 2 with Kirk and Spock fighting to the death. Get a da 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 da. He'd be fighting over the candle. He'd be like, "No, Jim, I must stay here. This is my family." Blah blah blah. And Kirk would be like, "Snap out of it, you green-blooded Vulcan." And then McCoy would say some green-blooded, crazy comment about Vulcans. And I know that's more humorous. It's not meant to be philosophical, but I could see something like that. Ultimately, I do agree with you, but I would love to see like an Amok time part 2 fight and a Chekhov saying, "Oh yeah, we had candles just like that in Russia," or whatever.
Awesome. That's awesome. What about you, Sophia?
So as much as I agree that at the end, Kirk would probably like wrap it in an American flag and set the candle on fire, strong disagree that he would immediately be like, no, something's wrong. I feel like for the first like 2 weeks, he'd be like, get some, and be like super happy that Spock is finally like seeming to behave like him. Because I feel like if there was a TOS episode where Spock was like, found this candle, we're buds now, peacing out, everybody would be like, yep, that's just a normal Tuesday on the Enterprise. So I feel like Spock being like, hey, I'm experiencing a whole bunch of emotions. They're all love for this candle man. I gotta go to Scotland now. Kirk would be like, I'm finally rubbing off on you. I'm so proud. Little, like, fly, birdie, fly. And then, like, eventually he'd be like, oh, something's up. But it would take him a long time.
Okay, so I do want to say I don't agree with you, but you did remind me of something else I think he might do. I could also see Kirk's personal log like 10 minutes into this episode being like, something's wrong. Oh no, I'm gonna have to seduce someone. Right? Like I think his solution, if fire and American flags don't work, is I will seduce Ronan the Candleman myself. But in all seriousness, for just a second, Kirk being willing to sacrifice himself for a member of his crew, absolutely something he would do. Absolutely something he would actually do. So now, whether or not it would be in that way, I don't know, but probably.
Wouldn't Kirk sacrificing himself for a member of his crew be a much better ending than Star Trek Generations, where he dies on a random bridge in some random planet? I mean, I don't mean to bring that sore topic up amongst Trek fans of the way Kirk dies, because it is a sour topic and a sore subject for many, myself included. But it'd be a better ending, him sacrificing himself for Spock than him falling off some bridge battling friggin' Soren on some random planet. So it's just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So for me, yeah, I agree. And Kirk as an individual, right? He is someone that literally for Spock, Kirk has gone and brought Spock back from the dead. He is someone that will not stop, right? Spock is that important to him. So if Kirk observes that Spock is caught in that situation, he will stop at nothing to try and get Spock back. I think he's going to go down to Spock, slap him a few times and say, I'm appealing to your sense of duty first, because Kirk is he's got a strong sense of duty. Then he's going to appeal to Spock's sense of logic, to saying, look at this. This is completely illogical. What is happening with you? This does not make any sense. Where's your logic? where's your duty? He will find out about Ronan and then find some way to have Ronan come in like a corporeal form, so that if all else fails, Kirk will be there and will fight Ronan in hand-to-hand combat to somehow expose Ronan for the kind of the parasite he is, so that because if logic and duty has failed for Spock, he has to somehow show Spock empirically, like objectively, Spock, this has been what has been keeping you here. It's not what you think. So that Spock can immediately be taken out of that spell and go, oh, I was under a spell and this was logic. But yeah, I totally agree. Kirk will go to no ends, will stop at no ends to help his friend. And like, absolutely. That is yeah, Adrienne, thank you for that like scenario. That was just awesome.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, Kirk does steal the Enterprise to go, for Spock, right? So why wouldn't he go to every end possible? We've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, Zach, I think we have our final scenario here, and this is a very exciting one. Probably one of the most famous Trek episodes, The Inner Light.
Yeah, The Inner Light. I debated on this one. There were a couple different ones I wanted to talk about, but The Inner Light, when I was younger watching Trek, The Inner Light was one of several slow episodes that I would skip over because they were boring to me. Now that I'm older and I have a family, these episodes hit way harder, and they're ones I actually reach out and watch over again because of the impact they have. I enjoy them so much more than I used to. I love The Inner Light. It is, if you're a Trek fan and you don't know what episode I'm talking about, then there's something seriously wrong. If you're not a Trek fan, the gist of the episode is Picard is zapped by an alien probe. He relives the life of another person on another planet that's been long dead and long gone for a long time, and lives this entire life basically in a matter of moments in real time. And then he is awakened back on the bridge after a few moments of being, unconscious by everyone's favorite doctor, Dr. Beverly Crusher. And he during this time learned to play this flute and raised a family and got married and everything else. And they learned that this alien probe goes around and does this in order to keep the memories of their civilization alive. It's a way to stay, I guess in existence, if that's the right word, even though they're all long gone. So to preserve the memories of their species and their race and everything else. So it's a wonderful, wonderful episode. You see a much different side of Picard in this episode than I think any other TNG episode. And to me, if I was going to drop a different captain in this, I'm going with Archer and Janeway in each time, because they're the two maybe I want to say most dissimilar from Picard of the captains, I think. So with Archer, for example, right? Archer is someone, and he even admits in one of the episodes in season 3 of Enterprise that, nope, he never took that time to settle down and start a family or anything like that. He's got his beagle, right? We know Porthos, so he does have an empathetic side. And we do see that through Enterprise. He has some empathy, but he also expects certain behaviors out of his bridge crew and his senior officers. I think with Archer, both with Archer and Janeway, I think both of them would push back so hard to start any kind of a family or ever believing that they're actually this other person, that they know that they've got to get back to the ship. They know they're actually themselves. Archer would probably open up some kind of dialogue and say, I'm from the Earth vessel Enterprise, and I'm from a planet called Earth, and here's where you can locate me on a map, tell the aliens where to go and destroy everything. And then with Janeway, she's obviously, very strong, super independent. But she also changes throughout Voyager. And I know, Chris, we had this discussion at one point too about, what Janeway are we talking about? Are we talking about early show Janeway or late show Janeway? Because an early Voyager, she's very stick to her guns. Everything's about Starfleet protocol and everything Starfleet, Starfleet, Starfleet. We can't violate Starfleet rules and regulations and codes and everything else. And yet Chakotay reminds her, but part of the crew isn't even Starfleet, they're Maquis. Like, we're really going to hold everybody that standard. And then she eventually over time realizes, okay, I have to kind of loosen it up on that because I got to get my crew home and I've just got to do whatever I have to do to survive. I don't think either Janeway or Archer has a family during their life on this planet. I think they stay single. I think that they're bent on, as they learn about this planet and what's going on with the sun, I think they both focus on trying to find a way to stop the sun from going supernova or whatever they say it does, especially Janeway, because Janeway was on the science track, right? We know, in fact, I think she was the only of the legacy Trek captains to go up through the sciences to become captain versus going on a command track, I think. So I think neither one of them starts a family. If between the two, I think Archer would be more likely. And then both of them are trying to develop ways to make life better for the village and for the people using science. And Janeway in particular is trying to find a way to stop the sun from imploding, or their star from imploding, knowing full well they were both captains on a Starfleet vessel, and they're not this person that everybody says they are. Thoughts?
I agree with you to a point. So I do think they would both be far more resistant than Picard. Although Picard is resistant for a while, but it's like then his wife in this world makes him apparently like a good bowl of soup, and then that's like it. Like
Yep.
it's very much like if you're familiar with like biblical stories at all, there's the story in the Old Testament of like Esau selling his birthright for a bowl of lentils. And
Yep.
I've always been like, how good was that soup, man? Like, how hungry were you? And that to me is like what Picard does in this. So it's like he's very resistant, but then it's like one good bowl of soup and a back rub, and he's like, this is better than where I came from. And I do think Archer would resist a lot. I do think he would eventually give in, though, just because I think he would say, this is really nice. Like, I've never had the chance to do this, and I'm going to keep my project, but I am going to give in maybe a year or two into it. I think Janeway would resist for a very long time, probably 10, 15 years. But I do think if we're putting her in the same scenario, there's going to be children here that are supposedly her children, right? I do think eventually she's going to have a really hard time resisting that just because she's not a robot. And I think eventually 10 or 15 years into it, she will sort of slowly start to like integrate. But I do think she'll hold on to this, like, let me try and find a way to save the planet. And I don't think she'll ever give that up at all. I think by the time we get to the scenes where she's an old woman, her family thinks she's completely given up all these old notions of, oh, she was really a Starfleet captain from this other thing. And isn't it good that mom totally gave that up? And oh, remember those stories grandma used to tell, but doesn't? And then I think when she finally dies on this planet, she's buried, and we see this scene where she's being put into like a coffin or however they bury her. But then her grandson comes up and puts a little folded piece of paper on top of where she's buried, and he's drawn like a Starfleet insignia because he
Oh,
knows that she
wow.
never actually gave up, and she never really did. And that's how that would be. And and that's just what I think. Also, if you're interested in this idea of people never fully giving up on their culture or what that should be like, there's a movie I could recommend called Silence. It's a 3-hour film with almost no dialogue about the ethics of Catholic missionaries in feudal Japan. I realize how it's deep. There's a lot there, but there's some similar ideas embedded that we see in like the inner light. So if you're interested in like deep moral quandaries that challenge things like colonialism, but also just deep human ideas, can recommend the film Silence. Andrew Garfield and Liam Neeson are in it, by the way. Really great. But that's how I think that would play out. I think we would think finally at the end she had given up, but we would learn that she actually never had, but she'd kept it a secret between her and like her little like fake grandson.
The only part that I would disagree with would be that Janeway has a family, just because I feel like she'd be so held on to the scientific principles that makes her, I feel like, who she is to a certain extent. But in the inner light, if I remember correctly, doesn't when Picard shows up as this other person, he doesn't have any kids yet, right? I mean, he shows up just as himself, and then eventually he meets a wife, and then they have kids. So if Janeway followed the same suit and finds someone and has kids with them, I think that point she would have given up and changed, right? And maybe I don't know if I'm remembering the episode correctly.
It may be unclear as to when they have them. So maybe they're already there, or maybe they come later. So I'm not actually sure about that. I do agree with you though. I think like, I don't think she would be like, okay, yes, let me like have children with you. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that would happen
yeah.
at all. But I do think if there were already children, I do think she would fall in love with them. And
Yeah.
my evidence for this is that episode in season 2 where Joel Grey plays that old man, where she has to pretend to be his daughter.
Oh,
And
yeah.
by the end of that episode, I think she's about ready to just stay there
Yeah.
and like take care of him. So I do think if they already existed, I think she would have a very hard time resisting that.
That's a really good point. I did not even think about that episode in Voyager. That's an episode of Voyager where I feel like you see a whole different side of Janeway that we really don't see much of the whole rest of the show. So that gentleman has a huge impact on her, right? The pretending to be his daughter and everything. Yeah. Chris, Sophia, what about you guys?
For me, I think Archer, there'd be a great sense of confusion for Archer. So I just take it where, so at the point in Archer's life, right, it's not like they hadn't met too many other civilizations. So I think there would be a great deal of confusion of Archer. Archer, by his nature, is he's the raw sense of the explorer, of the new explorer. So that is all real for him. So he's going to be confused. I think there's going to be a lot of rejection of this scenario. He's going to be empathetic to the situation of the planet, and still try and help them if he can. But I don't see him accepting like the family. I think he's going to live out, if he can't leave, he's going to live out his life there, like alone and with Porthos as much as he can, because this is all so new, so foreign to him. He's just coming from like Earth and this new phase of Earth's exploration that I don't see Archer like accepting it. I think he'll just reject it. And I agree completely. Like Janeway will never give up, because she's carrying with her, like if we assume that this happens while she's in the Delta Quadrant, she's carrying with her like her decision that has her crew in the Delta Quadrant. So she's got this huge sense of responsibility and guilt, and that will never leave, and that will tie into her never trying to give up and leave the planet. So she'll make the best of the situation she can, but I think she will never give up, and that's going to carry with her, because she is not at peace with herself, right, when she's in the Delta Quadrant by any means. And then Archer is just that this is so early in Earth's exploration that he's just going to be confused and he won't be able to accept it. So that's what I'm thinking on that scenario.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Sophia, what about you?
I completely agree with Chris. And Adrienne, I also completely disagree with you thinking that if there were just children there, that Janeway would just accept them. And the Paris Janeway salamander triplets agree with me.
It was only a matter of time before somebody brought up Threshold.
The charges of child abandonment against Catherine Janeway are real. She'd do it again. But I completely agree, Chris, where there would be this distrust with Archer where like he'd just be like, no, I'm not going to subscribe to any of this. And I completely agree where Janeway would be like, oh, like I need to get back. Like I have the sense of duty. And I also believe that she also just seeing, let's say this was like later seasons Voyager, how many scenarios turned out to be, oh, Q is involved, or this alien race wants to give you a test. I could see her thinking for decades that this was a test that she had to pass, or that she has to do something correct, or say yes or no to the right people, or fix probably the sun issue, and she will be rewarded with getting back to her crew. So I completely agree that she would be so single focused, and because of that, things like children, personal relationships, learning to play the flute would not be on her radar, and she would just be like, I need to pass this test, I need to solve this riddle, and then I can go back to my crew.
I totally forgot to mention the flute. We had this conversation before we started recording about, would Archer really play a flute, or would he play like a guitar or a mandolin or something like that? You know, like I think Archer would play an instrument. Yeah, I do. But I couldn't see Janeway playing a flute or something like that. That's not anywhere even in the stratosphere for her. So yeah, well said.
I do think, though, really quickly, Sophia, that she could, though, I think she could get to a point where she believes that the test is to live out this life on the planet, though. Like, I do think she could, at a certain point, after being there for a long enough time, I could see her believing, okay, I do think this is the test, but I think she could accept that it's some sort of spiritual test, right? Can she accept staying in one place? Can she accept what fate has given her and like make the best of it? Like I think she could end up believing absolutely that this is some sort of test, that she's actually unconscious somewhere, and that this is all happening in her head, which is what it is. But that this is some like lesson that someone wants her to learn, you know, or even that it's some weird, I don't know, like alternate life sort of thing. I don't know, but I do very much think eventually she would say, for me to get out of this, I have to see it through, right? Like I have to stay here and figure it out, and or die here in order to get out of it.
The question then becomes, does she figure that out too late to really carry everything out like the way Picard did? You know what I mean? Does she hold on too long, like you said, Chris, so focused on the idea like, no, I've got a crew back on Voyager, I've got to get them home to out of the Delta Quadrant, get them home. And then when she realizes, okay, well, maybe I've been here so long now, maybe this isn't maybe I have to stay here, maybe I have to see this through, maybe this is a test, and then gets to that point and looks around and goes, oh man, I'm old now, it's too late, have I missed it, did I fail the test? Like maybe it's a combination, I don't know, but that's very fascinating. I'd be really fascinated to see Janeway more than any other captain. I think see Janeway in this episode, right?
Well, and then to add on to that, how then does that affect, let's say this happens in season 3 of Voyager, how does that affect then her for the rest of the series?
Yeah.
Is she a lot more like, let's just take our time getting home because life is a highway, guys. Like we might as well enjoy it. Like, would she change her mind on potentially pursuing a relationship with Chakotay? Would she, I just think it would be, yeah, I think I agree with you. Of all the captains, I would love to see what's happened to her, and maybe in like season 3 or 4. And then would we have like a pre-Inner Light Janeway and a post-Inner Light Janeway?
Do you think, I mean, because TNG was episodic, right? Do you feel that post Inner Light Picard was different than pre Inner Light, or was he still the same? Because I don't know I really noticed a huge change in Picard after the Inner Light, but I feel like with someone like Janeway, if you're a writer on that show, there would have to be a change in tone and a change in the way she approaches certain situations moving forward. That's kind of how I would look at it.
Picard is so internal. He's such an internalizer that it did affect him.
Yeah.
But internally, it affected him deeply, but like internally, it didn't really change the way he like went about things professionally. I think maybe it affected how he moved in relationships with people, but even then he didn't change the way he responded. So I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think, Sophia, that there was any kind of significant change in Picard after? And then do you think Janeway would be vastly different post Inner Light?
That's such a good question. I agree that I don't really think there was a huge change for Picard. I think for Janeway, we see, like, even though it was also episodic, we do see episodes affecting her. I'm thinking, I think it was in season 4, Night, the one where it's kind of similar to Year of Hell, where they're
Oh, it's
just
pitch
going through
black.
this vastness of
Yeah.
space, and she
Creepy
just
as
like
heck.
locks herself in her ready room and is so withdrawn and so like self-sabotaging and just feels so bad. And I think that we do, like, everything was building up into that, and then after that we see kind of a more broody Janeway, a Janeway who is thinking through things a little bit more, and that, like, the loss of crew members is really weighing on her. So I think that we would see a huge change in her, but I do think that it it would manifest more as I was away from my crew. It's so easy. It was so easy for this to happen to me that I was away, and it was a lifetime for me. It was only a couple of seconds for them, but like, how can I not have this happen again? How can I have safeguards in place so that if I'm incapacitated, people can still, go with our mission? Like, I could see it really affecting her negatively, and I could see her focusing more on that single goal rather than being like, "Ooh, time to start a relationship, time to think about things like that." Like, I could see it making her double down on, like, "Nope, gotta get home."
Mm. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I have to completely agree with you, Sophia. Janeway is not a person that is at peace with herself, so she will never, for me, I don't think she will never let that go. Everything that's kind of her core issue, like in the series, like she has to come to terms with these are the decisions, like it's not all her fault, but she made decisions that um the consequences, the crew is in the stays in the Delta Quadrant, and so you kind of see uh, how she carries herself in those really difficult episodes, how she handles herself in Year of Hell. She's just, she won't accept that. She cannot accept peace, and she'll just be resistant to that until everyone is home, and then at that point she can rest, but it's not going to be until then.
And that's where I think she, like you said, Chris, she can't resolve in the Inner Light if she's in that situation, right? She can't come to grips with it. She can't let it go until she's back with her crew and she's gotten them home. Because in that situation, right, she's been taken out of that situation and now she's in a foreign place and she's left the crew and she doesn't know what's happened to them. Have they made it home? Where am I at? How long have I been here? And she's wrestling with that whole episode until she's awakened again on the bridge.
Yeah, that actually, and it might like harm her like sanity, you
Mhm.
know, for there too, perhaps.
Or I also thought too, let's say she does come back to the bridge. Would she then wrestle with the fact if, like you said, Adrian, she eventually does give in and lives this life out? Would she come back and wrestle with the idea of, I cannot believe that I gave up on my crew for this bit of happiness over here? Like, I feel like I betrayed them because I allowed myself to give up. And would that then become something she wrestles with for the rest of the show?
Hmm.
Yes, but that's how she and Chakotay finally get together, because I
There
think
you go.
Chakotay would very much be like, everything you're feeling is valid, and you have to change your perspective and how you're looking at what happened to you. You accepted what you were experiencing. You accepted what had been dealt to you. That doesn't mean that you gave up,
Mhm.
right? You accepted this, and this was, in essence, a spiritual journey that you ended up going on, and then now you can do what you will with that. And then they kiss.
And then Voyager end scene over. And we have some good closure. Yeah, that's great. Well, Adrienne, Sophia, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. I loved it. This was such a great chance to talk Trek, obviously, and just some, differently unique scenarios. I mean, I laughed pretty dang hard in this. This was a great time. So thank you so much both for coming on and doing this. We really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having us on. We had a blast.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah,
It's
and
so
we
wonderful.
and we look forward to continuing this collaboration on a future date. This was an awesome. I mean, we could do this for days. There's so many scenarios out there. We had so many written down we could have done. There's so many scenarios out there, and you could do like an 8-parter on this, just of different scenarios and putting the captains in, and this idea of what if that we discussed during this. Yeah, this was a great time. We really do appreciate it. And for all of you who have been watching and listening to this, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this. Please go check out the Where's Beverly podcast. Where can everybody find your guys' podcast, by the way?
So we're wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Where's Beverly, Instagram at Where's Bev, and send us your fanfic recommendations, pictures of your cats to where'sbeverly@gmail.com.
There you go. That's fantastic. Yeah, we appreciate. It's always great having people on, getting different perspectives, different viewpoints, because it changes the dynamic. It changes the approach and how we look at situations. And that's what I love about Star Trek is all four of us could watch The Inner Light, and all four of us could have a completely different take because of the way they wrote the shows, and because, like I said before, The Inner Light I would have skipped over when I was younger. Now I love the episode so much, and I'll go back and watch it. And I'm sitting there as watching an old Picard with these kids, going, I have kids. How would that affect me? And this growing up in this life somewhere else, and it just, yeah, it hits differently. You could watch the same episode 75 times, and the 76th time it hits you differently than the first 75, and it's just wonderful. So again, thank you very much, everybody. As always, this was a blast, Chris. I had an absolutely wonderful time.
This was incredible. I really appreciate you, Sophia and Adrienne. This was just magnificent to do with you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun. Lots of great discussions.
Yeah, and we look forward to chatting with you more in the future. So again, please be sure to go check out their podcast, Where's Beverly. Find it anywhere you get your podcasts and all over social media. Thanks as always. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well, and our YouTube channel. Unless you're watching us, you've kind of figured out that we have one. And we appreciate it as always, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt podcast.